It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Gordon Awandare, who is Director of the West African Center for Cell Biology and Infectious Pathogens. Gordon did a PhD in Pittsburgh and then had a postdoctoral position in Walter Reed, but he returned to his native Ghana in 2010 to pursue his great loves, which were the research on malaria, both the immune response and the parasite's replicative capacity. And Gordon has a particularly intimate feel for malaria because if you read his biographies and his various interviews, as a child he would experience malaria at least twice a year when the treatment was paracetamol, and he seems to have survived and thrived that. So we're much looking forward to hearing from him today. Gordon.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Good morning to everybody. On behalf of the University of Ghana, it's my pleasure to congratulate you for such an excellent program. The Cambridge Africa program has been tremendous for many African scientists, and we are very proud to be associated with this very excellent program. Over the last 7 years, we at the Department of Biochemistry, we've interacted a lot with colleagues in Cambridge as part of the Cambridge Africa program. And our relationship has grown and blossomed in various different ways. And so this morning, I'm going to tell you about what we've been doing in Ghana to build capacity for biomedical research and how Cambridge as a partner has been very helpful in that. So the center that we established is called the West African Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens, and this is closely associated with the Department of Biochemistry. So a little bit of background. So this center was established as one of the World Bank's African Centers of Excellence. So in 2013, the World Bank started an initiative to establish centers of excellence across Africa with the sole aim of producing local capacity to train scientists in Africa. The ultimate goal is to reduce the brain drain and, even possibly start to bring back some of our talent that has left the continent. So myself and colleagues from the Department of Biochemistry and the Noguchi Memorial Institute, we put in a proposal to establish WACCBIP as a center of excellence at the University of Ghana for training biomedical scientists. We were selected, and our main mandate was to provide training at master's and PhD level, and also short courses on the biology and pathogenesis of tropical diseases. We were supposed to also promote innovation in the sub-region by collaborating with colleagues in other countries and also with the private sector. Then in 2015, we were fortunate enough to also benefit from the Wellcome Trust Deltas program, which is now being run from the African Academy of Sciences by Isa and Tom here. So we put in a proposal to this scheme to strengthen what we are already doing with support from the World Bank. And our proposal was basically asking for additional funding to expand our PhD training program to include human genetics into our training, so that will allow us to do more host pathogen interactions, to do immunogenetics. And we thought that this was very important to drive innovation and the development of new approaches. We also wanted to expand our network. So one of the things that we wanted to do with the Deltas program is to include partners from East Africa and then Southern Africa. So we're able to add colleagues from those regions. And then I think one of the most important parts of our Deltas program was to have a postdoctoral program. With the World Bank program, they focused mostly on master's and PhD training. So we asked from the Deltas program to establish a postdoc program, which will give opportunities to our graduates from our PhD program, but also serve as a tool to attract some of the young Africans who have trained abroad and are willing to come back home. We also set up a student visitor program, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. So just to give you a snapshot of what we do, so the short courses, we mostly run 1 to 2 week courses. Most of these are driven by funding agencies or collaborators. I'll give you examples later. And then we also provide internships and attachments. So we have students and young faculty from various countries, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire. They come to the center for a few months to learn specific techniques or to use some of the equipment that we have been able to assemble. And then our master's and PhD programs are 1 year of coursework and then 1 year of research for the master's program, 3 years of research for the PhD program. And we have several partner institutions. We have about 10 African partner institutions where our students can do their research after the first year of coursework. Both master's and PhD students. And as part of our PhD program, we have the 3 to 6 month student vista fellowship, which is funded by the Deltas. And then the postdoc program is 3 years, which can be done at the University of Ghana or any of our African partner institutions. So since 2014, when we started, we've had a very significant impact on graduate training at the University of Ghana. Within our program at the Department of Biochemistry, enrollment of students into the graduate program has gone up more than 7-fold since we started the program. And that's because of the equipment, the funding for projects, and the fellowships that we've been able to provide. And if you look at across the programs, we've given fellowships to 152 African scientists from 10 African countries. And you'll see that if you look at the last column, we have a good representation from other African countries. In fact, our postdoc program, 63% of the postdoc, the postdocs are non-Ghanaian. So we reach out for the best scientists wherever they may be, and we try to harness their talent. We've also had several short courses, and hundreds of African scientists have benefited from those. Our research portfolio is broadening. We started off with infectious diseases, but then through the Deltas program, we were able to bring in human genetics, which allowed us to link with non-communicable disease research. So now, in addition to malaria and Buruli ulcer and trypanosomiasis, we have some fellows doing, autism, doing hearing impairment, sickle cell disease, and things like that because of the expansion of our portfolio. One of the things that have worked well for us is the institutional arrangement that the university has put in place for us. So because of the requirements of the World Bank, the center was set up as a semi-autonomous unit within the university, which gave us the flexibility to have our own separate accounts, to raise our own funds, and to use our funds in the best way that we can. So we have a system where we have our own staff, and the trade-off is that the university doesn't give us any direct funding. We have to fund our operations from grants, but then it gives us the flexibility to bypass a lot of university bureaucracy so we can get things done quickly. I'm sure that's a common problem everywhere. So, yeah, so we battle that every day, but we try to cut it short. So, another key thing that we did was to take control of the academic quality. Cambridge Africa, you would have experience with this, that when you try to run a capacity building program in Africa, and you have PhD students spread across various universities, it's a pain trying to run the program because different universities have different PhD program formats, different durations, different schedules, different quality, and it's very difficult. So one of the things we did was to develop our own program, take it through accreditation all the way to international accreditation from the Royal Society, so that we control our program. All the students in our program enroll in our program at the University of Ghana. They can do their research anywhere, but we control their schedule, we monitor their progress, and we ensure that the quality that we produce is what we desire. The other important thing is to improve the environment. I always say that a center of excellence must look like one. So, so we spend a lot of our resources trying to make the environment, look like a place where you can do quality research, because young people want to do cutting-edge science, and you have to provide an environment if you want them to stay in Africa. So we spend a lot of our money making sure that the environment is comparable to any world-class research environment, and it has really worked well for us. Also, bioinformatics. A lot of innovation in biomedical research now starts from informatics. So we've also invested some of our resources to acquire high-performance computing. And we installed it just a few months ago, and we are now building capacity in terms of manpower and technical support. We're also expanding facilities through the support of the World Bank. We are adding space to our existing building, and these are mainly student-centered spaces to provide more space for the students to have places to sit, to provide a bioinformatics facility, and then also to provide conference rooms for meetings. Our postdoc program, which I mentioned earlier, this is supported by the Deltas program, and it's one of our great successes. We've been able to attract 4 African scientists who were living abroad, and they were, they wanted to come home, and they wanted a good opportunity to come home. They wanted to be assured that they could do science at the level that they wanted. They wanted to be assured that they'll be able to feed their families. Okay, so through this program, we've been able to bring 4 of such people back to Ghana, and several others are in the pipeline, and we're trying to bring them back. So this is one of the really good successes of our program. Then building partnerships. We started off building institutional partnerships, collaborating within the University of Ghana to put in the application, building in national partners, hospitals, other research institutes within Ghana. Then within the sub-region, bringing in West African partners, going beyond West Africa, bringing East African partners, bringing Southern African partners, and then international collaborators. Our strongest collaborators, Cambridge, Oxford, London School, okay? We do a lot with these 3 institutions. And as we speak, more than 100 scientists across the world, but mostly from these 3 institutions and African institutions, have committed to helping in our program, supervising students, coming to teach modules, and giving workshops and hosting students in their labs. We've also been engaging a lot of the African scientists in the diaspora, and that has also helped some of them start planning to come back home and also to support some of our students. So with Cambridge, how did it start? For us, it started with Mark Carrington. So I went back to Ghana in 2010 after finishing my PhD and postdoc. And when I got back, I heard that a guy from Cambridge had come around the year before and was looking for collaborations, okay? But I had never met him. Then in 2010, when I was back, he came back again and said he wanted to put in an application to the Royal Society for a grant, the Liverhume program. And so, as somebody who was hungry for grants at the time, I volunteered to work with him to put in an application. Unfortunately, the application wasn't funded the first time, but 2 years later, we put in the same application, now with one of my younger colleagues who had come to join the department, and the application was funded. And since then, Mark has been an integral part of our program. He helped us with developing the curriculum when we started, all the way through accreditation. And now he has, he went on to have other grants with Teresa, and he and I, we've done a lot of things. He's also part of our Deltas project, and he coordinates our student visitor program here. He's also on our advisory board as well. So Mark is now WACCBIP, as you can, as much as you can say. Then also, around the same time, I went to lunch, and then I ran into these two troublemakers here. Professor James Wood and my senior colleague at the University of Ghana, Professor Yain Tiamabedu. I saw him at lunch, and Prof. Yain Tiamabedu told James Wood that you have to meet this troublemaker. This is one of the young people in the university who caused a lot of trouble. And, so we interacted, and apparently at the time they were working on the CAPREX application. So in our conversation, they asked me whether I had any collaborations with Cambridge, because they wanted to make sure they highlighted all the existing collaborations with Cambridge at the time. So I said, oh yeah, I've put in an application with my current thing, but we're not successful. That's how far I've gone with Cambridge so far. So they said, oh, but that's good. Can you write us one page about what you guys have done, so far? So I sent it in, and I never heard of them. The next time I heard was that they were inviting me to be part of the steering committee of CAPREX. So that's how it began, and then the journey of CAPREX up to this point. So we, as a department, because of my role on the committee, I really made sure that our department people took advantage of the program. So at the time, all the eligible faculty at the time applied for the program and were successful. So we had 6 of our faculty who got the CAPREX fellowships. And then in addition to the core biochem faculty, other faculty within the university who are part of our WACCBIP program who have also benefited here, Sam Kofi, Ben Kwashi, Linda Amwa, and Joanna, all of them have benefited from CAPREX. And a lot of things have come out of these partnerships. And I just highlight a few here. Professor Julian Griffin and my colleague, Lydia Mosi, who's now the head of the department, they've had a very good partnership, and they're working on Borrelia also. As we're coming, Lydia was working feverishly to bring samples so that they can do some metabolomics on them. Jules was also at our conference last year where he gave an excellent talk, which has stimulated a lot of interest in metabolomics in our center. Simon Frost and Sam Kofi, also very productive. We've done a couple of bioinformatics workshops at the University of Ghana, and most of the participants were students from our program. So these are some of the examples of CAPREX fellowships. Osborne Kwe, who's also a CAPREX fellow, he has also collaborated with the veterinary school to strengthen our virology lab. So 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we started a virology lab at the department. And around that time, James was in Ghana for the CAPREX AGM. And on our way to get a beer, I decided to take him by our labs and show him our new virology lab. And when we went there, he saw a nice space. It was a lot of empty space because we had just started a lab. And he got excited by the space because he has been working in Ghana for a while. And he told me that, his samples are squished in some freezers somewhere, and, he's really dying for space. So this was a great opportunity for him. And since then, he's linked up several of his other colleagues, and through that, they've got a few grants, which has helped to equip the lab, and now our virology lab is very much up and running. So, other partnerships, James Wood, again, making a lot of trouble, put me in touch with Professor Lisa Hall, who's at Chemical Engineering. And we put in a grant together for the Royal Society Collaborative Professors Grant, which we have now been funded for 5 years. And you see what engineers put in their grants. This is what was in the grant as a graphical summary of the project, which shows that we are going to develop a low-cost polymerase, which can work in rural areas without sophisticated equipment. And then if the enzyme works in Cambridge, we bring it to WACCBIP, get WACCBIP students to also be able to produce the enzyme in Ghana, and then we're going to try that in the hospitals in Ghana. So basically, that's the concept, and we are lucky that the Rare Society has funded that for 5 years. Then the Sanga Juggernaut. So as part of our collaborations with Cambridge, is our collaboration with Sanga. We have very strong collaborations with Julian Rayner over there, where we do malaria parasite invasion work, and also some vaccine studies related to that. Julian and Oliver have hosted some of the CAPREX fellows. In addition to that, we've done a whole lot of other things, but I'll mention a few. One of which was bringing their world-acclaimed, ultra-popular experimental genetics course to Ghana last year. So, Julian said they were looking for a place to run it in Africa, and of course, WACCBIP was ready to be the gateway to Africa. So we hosted that last year, and I think it was a good success, and I hope they'll be back again next year to continue. Then just to finish up our partnerships, a little bit more about the Student Vista program. So this is part of the Deltas program, and over the last few years, we've sent some of our students to Cambridge, Sanga, Oxford, London School, and the whole idea is for them to get a feel of, what a world-class research environment. In fact, my secret aim for doing that is to sort of demystify that whole drive to go abroad, because when they come and they go to Mark Carrington's lab, they realize that the lab is not that different from the lab at the University of Ghana. And then they realize that they run the same PCR, they do the same gels, and they work just as fine. So when they come back, you find that they are very well renewed and much more confident in what they are doing, and much more confident in the project that we are doing, the initiative that we have, which is that they can do whatever they want. They can achieve most of their aims working right there in Africa. So this is the real goal of this program, and it has been working wonders for us. So, one student spent some time in Lisa's lab where he was helped to develop low-cost biosensors, which we're now going to try to adapt for malaria and other diseases. And this is a real benefit of this program. Then a postdoc from my lab spent some time in Julian's lab making knockout vectors, which we're then going to use to study some new malaria parasite proteins that we are characterizing. So to summarize the program, what we're doing is, harnessing all our partnerships, synergizing the funding sources that we have to provide a training pipeline that would produce the next generation of African leaders. So we start with internships, short courses, masters, PhD, early postdoc, and then, senior postdoc. So we start with a lot of people, and then only the top survive, and then Africa has their next leaders. So to conclude, in Africa, nothing is smooth, so there are challenges. We're just starting to make progress, but challenges remain. I'm sure Tom will talk about some of these later. But how do we consolidate what we are doing and strengthen the capacity that we're building? So funding, local funding, this is now a big thing on the continent. The African Academy and others are pushing this, pushing African governments to commit. They've committed several times, but they haven't fulfilled the commitment. Would they actually put 1% of GDP into research? In Ghana, we've been talking about setting up a national research fund over several election cycles. Every election cycle, it is promised. And we have a lot of meetings and draw plans. When the next government comes, they set up a new committee to start drawing out new plans again, and then their time run out. So we've been going through this cycle for 20 years now. So this particular government has been talking about it for 2 years now. It's still not in their budget. We hope that the next budget that comes in January, there will be a budget line there that says $5 billion to start, set up the National Research Fund. So that's what we are pushing for. We still have a big problem with, getting reagents and equipment. It takes us 6 months to get things ordered and received in Ghana, and we cannot be competitive that way. When I travel, I bring 2 bags because I need to take reagents with me. So every time I'm coming, I hold a big suitcase, and my friends are wondering, why are you holding a big suitcase? You're going for 3 days, But it's because it saves me 6 months of time, because I have 50 PhD students at WACCBIP who need reagents, and we cannot be waiting 6 months every time. So these are some of the things that the government needs to do. In addition to establishing a research fund, they have to loosen the procedures so that science can be oiled by, the machinery that we need to work. At the institutional level, same thing. At the institutional level, they treat procurement of reagents like they will procure paper or, or toothpicks or whatever. It cannot be the same. So we need to have separate procedures for this. There has to be an understanding that ordering science reagents is not the same as ordering tables and chairs, and we have to have different procedures for that. Disbursement of funds, as much as we've made a lot of progress by having our center set up in a semi-autonomous manner, which allows us to have our payments done in only 2 weeks. The normal university procedures could take you 3 or 4 weeks, but it's still 2 weeks is a long time for a payment to be made, because if we need to buy reagents and the suppliers are waiting for the money to be paid before they ship the reagents, 2 weeks is a long time for you to wait every time. So we are pushing for some of these things to be loosened so that we can set up a more efficient system. Formalizing the postdoc position. In many African universities, postdoc is an alien thing. When we started our postdoc program, I spent a lot of time pushing bureaucracy. A lot of the university bureaucrats didn't know what a postdoc was. So when I said I have a postdoc, I need you to give him a university ID card so they can have access to facilities. They say, no, they've never heard that before. The person is not being paid by the university, so or the government, so they don't know how to treat the person. So the university needs to modernize and make provision for independent units like ours to be able to have scientists who are funded through grants and who can make a contribution. Allowing cross-departmental programs to run. Our program is very much an example of that. Even though we are based at the Department of Biochemistry, we have a lot of faculty who contribute from Noguchi, from biomedical engineering, from the medical school, and that's the strength of the program. So across the university, we have 30 faculty who teach in the program, who supervise students, and that's something that is important. Equipment maintenance. You find a lot of equipment lying idle because something needs to be changed, and there's nobody locally to make it. And then if you call the manufacturer, they say ship it to them so that they will fix it for you. And the cost of shipping it is, it's almost like buying a new one. So then you pack it on the side, and then you're looking for money to buy a new one. So these are issues that we need to fix. Private sector. In Ghana, university or academia is the dumping ground for private sector. Whenever they get the opportunity, they tell us that we do research that's not relevant and that we train scientists or graduates that they cannot use. Okay, but we are also challenging them to come to the table and let us, train the people together so that they'll be useful, so that the research should be useful. So these are some of the things that the private sector needs to do. Then travel within Africa. It's much easier for me to come to London than to go to some of my neighboring countries. Going to Burkina Faso, I need to go to Abidjan and then go to Ouagadougou, okay? And it takes me a whole day. So sometimes it costs me more than coming to the UK. And these are some of the barriers to true regional integration and a true takeoff of science in our region. So I would end there, and I want to thank all our various sponsors, including Cambridge Africa. Thank you very much.
That was absolutely fantastic. That's a litany of achievements delivered in an incredibly modest way. And I think we could see the driving force behind all that. I also think there was quite a lot of interest in the audience about this semi-autonomous capability of bypassing university bureaucracy if you can raise the money. You might have a number of people asking you about that privately afterwards. So Gordon, you've kept beautifully to time, and there's time for some questions. So if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, I think there are some roving microphones. If not, you may just have to shout.
Hello, Professor Awandare. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting to see the good work that you're doing in Ghana. I was particularly interested in the slide that you showed about the impacts of your training, the master's programs, the PhD programs, the postdoctoral fellowship. And I was a little bit concerned about the proportion of your trainees that are female, because it's about a third for most of the programs, and I was just wondering, it's a bit challenging for women in science and stuff. I was wondering if there are particular strategies or measures that you've put in place to sort of attract more women into your programs.
That's a very good question. Thank you very much. So a couple of points. One thing to note is that our program is a hard basic science, like hardcore basic science, which traditionally hasn't appealed to a lot of females. So that is changing now. When I was doing biochemistry, I'll give you an example. When I was doing biochemistry as an undergrad, we had a class of 27. We had 2 females in it. If you went to nutrition and food science, you had 50-50. So the interest takes time. Now, in our undergraduate program, we have 45% female. So it's trickling up. It's going to come. But for now, it's just that we don't get enough applications from females, unfortunately. We're trying. Our faculty is now more than half female, I think. Our head of department is a strong lady who's going to speak soon. So we're trying. We're reaching out. We take extraordinary steps to make sure that our females get the opportunity that they deserve. So we're just waiting for more applications to come in, and they'll get a chance that they deserve. So it's not for a lack of trying. It's just that the basic sciences are just now getting the interest of females in Africa. It has not traditionally been an area where a lot of females have been interested in. So we're trying to make it more interesting. So I think we're making an impact because our undergrad program is picking up. We find a lot of, the percentage of females in the undergraduate program is picking up. And by the way, most of those who are usually in the top 5 are females, yeah? And they always sit at the front row. When I go to class, I always see the females sitting at the front, which is very encouraging. That means they're very interested. And they do well. It shows in the grades, okay? In my class, always number 1 and number 2, either both females or at least one female, okay? So it is not a lack of trying. It's not a lack of ability. It's just an interest, and we're trying to drive it. Thank you.
Could I just ask people to introduce themselves if they're going to ask a question, say who they are and where they're from?
Hi there, it's Ian Goodfellow from the University of Cambridge, Department of Pathology. I just wondered if you could say something a bit more about the challenges associated with equipment maintenance. This is something that we've encountered ourselves in McKinney, and it's becoming an increasing problem. I don't know of any easy solution. I don't know if you've found some local capacity to...
Yes, that's it's something that gives us a lot of heartburn. So there are no easy solutions that I can think of because, again, it's in West Africa, for example, research is developing, So most of these companies do not think that it's profitable to have, hubs within the sub-region to service equipment because they just don't think there's enough equipment to sort of justify the investment. So what we've been doing at WACCBIP is we have like an equipment maintenance unit, which we're trying to build capacity for. The problem is, how do we retain the people in the unit? Because a lot of people don't want to be maintaining equipment forever. They get a PhD program, they're gone, okay? So is that, challenge of building the capacity and retaining it. So, but we're trying. Right now we have somebody who is doing his PhD in biomedical engineering, and he's heading our equipment unit. We are hoping that when he finishes his PhD, he will stay faithful, like we've stayed faithful with him whilst he's doing his PhD. So he will remain and head the unit so that we can build capacity, so that they can learn when people travel to come and maintain the equipment, they can transfer the technology. Every equipment we buy, we try to include training in the contract. So when we pay for the equipment, they have to send somebody to come and train on routine maintenance and simple troubleshooting and things like that. So we're starting to build a capacity to do the simple parts of the process. We're just hoping that the capacity will remain, because historically, when people become so good, they find an opportunity and they move. So it's very difficult to maintain the good technicians who can maintain this equipment. So that's one of the challenges. But it's a big problem across the sub-region, I think.
Hi, I'm Val Dutra from Brazil, visiting the World Wellcome Trust Global Health Program. My question was, I was curious to know, you mentioned earlier that you have some quality control of the research that has been done within your program. And I was curious to know, what do you think would be the most, or are the most important measures that you take to assure that quality? Is it something that you do internally, or do you have an international committee, or how does that work? Thank you.
Thank you. I would say all of the above. So it starts from the curriculum development. That's why we developed our own curriculum. And we did it in consultation with the American Society for Cell Biology, Cambridge, Oxford. Then we tested it through the accreditation process. We volunteered to take it to international accreditation. We invited the Royal Society to evaluate the program, and we passed, and we got the accreditation. So that's how to start. Then you have to be very strict with enrollment, because the old saying says what? Garbage in, garbage out. If you do not get the very best, you're not going to be successful. So we have a very strict enrollment policy. We make it very competitive. And those who get into the program, 90% of the time, they make it. They're very good. So those are the key things. And then you have to monitor. Even very good students, if you do not monitor and put pressure on them, they would go astray. So we monitor. We take regular progress reports every semester, and we make sure that everybody's on track. If there are issues, we address them before they go out of hand. So the monitoring is very important. And then having the international partners. So when we have student committees, we always have one international partner on board. All their research proposals, we get them reviewed by both internal and external colleagues, so that at every level, there's quality control. There's peer review. There's an external eye on what you're doing, so that we don't get complacent and then drift into the doldrums. So, thank you.
All right. We can probably squeeze in one very quick question up at the back, because we started a little bit late. Right at the back, on the right.
Thank you very much. My name is Damilola. I'm a PhD student here. I just have a simple question. How do you sort of power your laboratories? Because you did not mention energy as a challenge. I mean, how do you sort of get like, constant electricity and things associated with power?
I'm sorry, I'll add it. It's a challenge. No, I think Ghana, we've been more fortunate. Are you from Nigeria? I'm just asking. It has nothing to do with the question. I'm just asking. Yeah, but, you know, we have been a little more fortunate than our friends from Nigeria in terms of the power crisis. So a few years ago, we had a real crisis for about 1 year, but it has been resolved for the most part. So we hardly have power outages. But we have, because of the crisis that happened a few years ago, we have a standby generator that kicks in when the power goes out. But I'm happy to say over the last 2 years, we've hardly used it, to the extent that the battery, you know, got destroyed because it wasn't being used. So the battery, the last time we went to turn it on, the battery wouldn't work. We had to buy a new battery because it had been sitting idle for such a long time. So yes, power was a problem 2 years ago. Now, not so much. Yeah. Nigeria, we hope you join us.
Good, thank you very much.